The sudden influx of rain caught Tessa Harper off guard as she dashed into the upscale restaurant, clutching her purse over her head in a futile attempt to protect her carefully styled hair. She was already running 15 minutes late for this double date her roommate had practically begged her to join, and now she looked like a drowned cat. Perfect. I'm with the Collins reservation, she told the hostess, trying to discreetly wring water from the ends of her chestnut hair. The hostess smiled sympathetically. Of course, your party is already seated, right this way. Tessa followed, trying to ignore the squishing sound her heels made against the polished floor. She spotted her roommate Mia waving enthusiastically from a corner booth. Across from her sat two men in business suits, one she recognized as Mia's new boyfriend, Ryan, and beside him, a stranger with sharp features and an even sharper gaze that locked onto her the moment she approached. Tessa, finally, Mia exclaimed, sliding over to make room. We were about to send a search party. This is Ryan and this is his best friend, Kyle Evans, the stranger said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm, confident. CEO of Meridian Publishing. Tessa tried not to roll her eyes at how quickly he'd mentioned his title. Another ego-driven executive, just her luck. Tessa Harper, she replied. Soaking wet elementary school art teacher, sorry about my appearance. The weather had other plans for my outfit tonight. I think you look perfect, said Ryan, earning an adoring look from Mia. Kyle, however, merely offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes before returning his attention to his phone. Tessa felt a flicker of annoyance. She'd been dragged to this double date to keep Ryan's friend company, and he couldn't even bother to be present. The evening progressed with Ryan and Mia lost in their own world, while Tessa attempted small talk with Kyle, who answered in clipped sentences between checking emails. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline could cut glass, and his suit probably cost more than her monthly salary, but his social skills were severely lacking. So publishing, Tessa tried again. That must be interesting. Kyle finally set his phone down. It can be. Though I doubt the inner workings of quarterly reports and acquisition negotiations would interest someone who spends their days with finger paints and safety scissors. Tessa's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I simply meant our worlds are quite different. You don't say, she muttered, taking a large sip of her wine. Ryan chuckled nervously. Kyle's company just acquired a major children's book publisher, actually. Maybe you two have more in common than you think. Kyle cleared his throat. True, Brightwater Books is now under our umbrella. We're expanding our educational division. Brightwater. Tessa sat up straighter. I love their books. My students adore the Percy Penguin series. Something shifted in Kyle's expression. You're familiar with them, of course. I use them in my classroom all the time. The illustrations are incredible, and the stories actually teach meaningful lessons without being preachy. She leaned forward, suddenly animated. The newest one about ocean conservation had my kids picking up trash at recess for weeks. For the first time that evening, Kyle looked genuinely interested. I haven't read that one yet. We just finalized the deal last month. Well, Mr. CEO, you should probably read what you're selling, Tessa said with a challenging smile. The corner of his mouth twitched. Perhaps I should. By dessert, Tessa had almost forgotten how insufferable Kyle had been at the start of the evening. Their conversation had evolved from children's books to education policy to their shared love of historical fiction. He was still frustratingly handsome, but at least now she knew there was an actual human beneath the corporate facade. As the evening came to an end, Ryan suggested they all go for drinks at a nearby bar, but Tessa declined. I have 28 art projects to grade by Monday, she explained. But it was nice meeting you both. Kyle stood when she did. I should get going too. Early meeting tomorrow. I'll walk you out, Tessa. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city streets glistening under the streetlights. Kyle hailed a cab for her with an effortless wave. Thank you for an unexpectedly pleasant evening, he said, opening the door. You proved me wrong about elementary school teachers. And you almost made me forget you were a pretentious CEO, she replied with a grin. Almost. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. Perhaps we could continue this conversation another time, maybe over coffee, Tessa hesitated. This wasn't part of the plan. Kyle was Ryan's friend, meant to be her one-time double-date companion so Mia wouldn't feel guilty about wanting to spend time with her new boyfriend. Plus, men like Kyle, powerful, wealthy, undeniably attractive, weren't typically interested in women like her for anything serious. I don't think that's a good idea, she said finally. Kyle's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Fair enough. Good night, Tessa Harper. She slid into the cab, giving her address to the driver. As they pulled away, she glanced back to see Kyle still standing on the curb, watching her leave. A small part of her wondered if she'd made a mistake. The following Monday, Tessa was helping her second graders with a papier-mâché project when the classroom phone rang. The school secretary sounded oddly flustered. "Tessa, there's a delivery for you in the office. It's quite something." Curiosity piqued, Tessa asked her teacher's aide to watch the class for a moment. In the main office, she stopped short at the sight of a towering bookshelf, filled with every single title from Brightwater Books' catalog. Attached was a simple note: homework assignment for the CEO. "Dinner this Friday?" Kyle, the school secretary, grinned. "Should I tell the extremely handsome delivery man you accept?" Tessa's heart raced. The gesture was extravagant, perhaps overly so, but undeniably thoughtful. Through the office window, she could see Kyle leaning against a sleek black car, no suit today but casual in dark jeans and a navy sweater that somehow made him look even more attractive. "Tell him I'll think about it," Tessa said, though she already knew her answer. Their first proper date was at a small Italian restaurant where Kyle knew the owner. Tessa arrived expecting to feel out of place, but instead found Kyle waiting at a corner table, no phone in sight, nursing a glass of red wine. "No executive emergencies tonight?" she asked, sliding into her seat. "I've implemented a new company policy: no phones during dinner with intriguing art teachers." "Quite the specific policy." "I find specificity is key in business and pleasure." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her flush. Conversation flowed easier than she expected. Kyle talked about growing up in a small town, working his way through college and building his company from the ground up. There was none of the arrogance she'd witnessed on their first meeting. Instead, she glimpsed passion and dedication. "What about you?" he asked. "Always wanted to teach." "Actually, I started as an artist, had a few gallery showings, even sold some pieces, but there was something missing." She twirled pasta around her fork. "Then I substituted at an elementary school for a friend and something clicked. The way children see the world, their unbridled creativity." "I went back for my teaching certificate the next week." Kyle's gaze softened. "You found your purpose." "I found joy," she corrected. "There's a difference. And are you suggesting I haven't found mine?" There was no defensiveness in his tone, just genuine curiosity. "Have you?" "You've achieved success, clearly. But success and purpose aren't always the same thing." He considered this, swirling the wine in his glass. "Perhaps that's why I acquired Brightwater. Children's books seem far from the cutthroat publishing world I usually inhabit, but something about it felt right." After dinner, they walked along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting on the water. When Kyle's hand found hers, Tessa didn't pull away. "Can I ask why you initially turned down my coffee invitation?" he asked. Tessa laughed softly. "You mean besides the fact that you spent the first 30 minutes of our double date ignoring me in favor of your email?" "Besides that," he said with a sheepish smile. "Which I apologize for, by the way. I guess I've dated men in positions of power before. It rarely ends well. There's always this imbalance, this sense that I'm somehow less." Kyle stopped walking, turning to face her. "I never want you to feel that way with me. Yes, I run a company, but that's what I do, not who I am. And from what I've seen, Tessa Harper, there's nothing less about you." Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her, soft and questioning. Tessa found herself rising on her toes, deepening the kiss, her hands finding the solid warmth of his chest. When they broke apart, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not sure what this is yet," he said quietly, "but I'd very much like to find out." "Me too," she admitted. Over the next few weeks, their lives began to intertwine in ways neither had expected. Kyle showed up at her classroom one afternoon to help judge an art contest. Tessa attended a publishing gala as his date, charming his colleagues with her genuine interest in their work. They discovered a shared love for old films, spending Sunday mornings watching classics at Kyle's penthouse, still in pajamas. But reality had a way of intruding. Kyle frequently had to cancel plans due to work emergencies. Tessa found herself wondering where she fit into his high-powered life. The insecurities she'd feared began to creep in, especially when a society page ran a photo of them at the gala with the caption, "Publishing tycoon Kyle Evans with unidentified guest." "Unidentified guest," she muttered, showing Kyle the article on her phone. "That's me, completely forgettable." "Hey," Kyle said firmly, taking her hand across his kitchen island. "You are anything but forgettable. These gossip rags don't matter. But they're your world, those people, that life." "No," he insisted. "They're part of my job, you're part of my life, there's a difference." Tessa wanted to believe him, but doubts lingered. The following week, Kyle invited her to an important dinner with potential investors. Tessa spent hours choosing the right outfit, settling on a simple black dress that made her feel elegant without trying too hard. The dinner was at one of those exclusive restaurants where the menu had no prices. Kyle introduced her proudly to everyone, his hand a constant presence on the small of her back. Tessa was doing her best to follow conversations about market shares and quarterly projections when one of the investors' wives turned to her. "So what do you do, dear? Model? Actress?" "I'm an elementary school art teacher," Tessa replied with a smile. The woman blinked. "How sweet. And how did you and Kyle meet?" "Actually, we were set up on a double date. He was supposed to be with my friend, but somehow we ended up connecting instead." The woman's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, I thought perhaps you'd met through the charity work." "Kyle's company is very generous with arts education grants." Tessa turned to Kyle, who suddenly seemed very interested in his stake. "I wasn't aware of that." Kyle cleared his throat. "It's something we've been expanding recently." Later, in the car ride home, Tessa couldn't hold back anymore. "Why didn't you tell me about your company's involvement in arts education? That's literally my passion, Kyle," he sighed, loosening his tie. "I was planning to. We're launching a new initiative next month, bringing artists into schools for workshops. I wanted to surprise you with an invitation to join the advisory board." "That's incredible," Tessa said, momentarily distracted. "But that's not the point. You've had weeks to mention this. It makes me wonder what else you're not sharing." Kyle ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "Nothing important, I promise, but my life is complicated, Tessa. There are always 1,000 things happening at once." "And where do I rank in those 1,000 things?" she asked quietly. Kyle reached for her hand. "At the very top." "Always." But his words, though sincere in the moment, were tested in the weeks that followed. Kyle missed Tessa's school art show because of a last-minute trip to London. Tessa found herself scrolling through business news sites, looking for mentions of Meridian Publishing, trying to piece together parts of Kyle's life he was too busy to share. The breaking point came when Tessa discovered through social media that Kyle had attended a charity gala in the city on a night he'd told her he was working late. She confronted him at his apartment, heart pounding. "You lied to me." Kyle's face fell. "I can explain." "Please do," she said, arms crossed defensively. "I was working. The gala was a business obligation. I didn't tell you because I knew you had parent-teacher conferences, and I didn't want you to feel bad about not being able to attend." "That wasn't your decision to make," Tessa exclaimed. "Do you know how it feels to see photos of my boyfriend at an event I didn't even know about? To wonder what else you're keeping from me because you think I can't handle it." Kyle moved toward her, but Tessa stepped back. "I think we need to take a step back," she said, voice trembling. "This isn't working." Tessa, please, we're too different, Kyle. Our worlds don't fit together. Maybe they never will. She left him standing in his immaculate living room, overlooking a city that suddenly felt too big, too overwhelming. The cab ride home was a blur through tears she refused to shed until she was alone. For 2 weeks, Kyle respected her wish for space. No calls, no texts, no elaborate gestures. Tessa threw herself into her work, staying late to prepare for the school's spring art exhibition. If her colleagues noticed her subdued mood, they were kind enough not to mention it. Then one afternoon, as she was hanging student artwork in the school gymnasium, the principal appeared. "Tessa, there's someone here about the Brightwater Arts Initiative. Can you spare a moment?" Curious despite herself, Tessa followed the principal to her office. She froze in the doorway when she saw Kyle, looking uncharacteristically casual in slacks and a button-down no-tie. "What are you doing here?" she asked when the principal discreetly left them alone. "Officially." "Finalizing details for the arts program funding." Kyle handed her a folder. "Unofficially, I missed you terribly." Tessa flipped through the folder, eyes widening at the proposed budget for arts supplies, visiting artists, and field trips to museums. "This is substantial." "It's important," Kyle said simply. "You made me see that." She closed the folder. "Kyle, before you say anything," he interrupted, "I need to show you something else." He pulled out his phone, opened an app, and handed it to her. "This is what I've been working on." Tessa looked down at a calendar app, heavily populated with color-coded events. "Your schedule, my life," he corrected. "Red is work obligations I can't avoid. Yellow is flexible work I can reschedule. Green is personal time that's non-negotiable." He pointed to multiple green blocks labeled with her name. "Movie nights, your school events, even just dinner at your apartment. You've scheduled us." "I've prioritized us," he clarified. "I've reorganized my entire company structure, delegated more, hired 2 new executives. Because I realized something when you walked away, Tessa. Success means nothing if I'm not sharing it with someone who matters, and you matter more than all of it." Tessa felt tears prickling. "It's not just about your time, Kyle. It's about feeling like I belong in your world." "You don't belong in my world," he said, taking her hands. "You've created a whole new one for me, a better one. One where boardrooms and balance sheets are just parts of my day, not my entire identity. And what about your fancy colleagues who see me as just the unidentified teacher on your arm?" Kyle laughed softly. "You must have missed the article last week about publishing CEO Kyle Evans, partner of renowned arts educator Tessa Harper. Your approach to creative education is becoming something of a talking point in philanthropic circles." "You're making that up," she said, but couldn't help smiling. "I'm not. You're changing my world, Tessa, and I'm desperately hoping you'll let me back into yours." Tessa studied his face, seeing the sincerity there, the vulnerability that the confident CEO rarely displayed. "I've missed you too," she admitted. "But I'm still scared that eventually you'll realize I don't fit." Kyle silenced her with a kiss, tender and fierce at once. When they parted, he kept his forehead pressed to hers. "You fit perfectly, right here." The school's spring exhibition became the official launch event for the Meridian Publishing Arts Initiative. Kyle stood proudly at Tessa's side as she guided visitors through displays of student artwork. His hand rarely left hers all evening, a subtle declaration that this wasn't business, this was personal. Later that night, as they walked through the park near Tessa's apartment, Kyle stopped beneath a streetlight. "I have a confession," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Tessa's heart skipped. "What is it?" "That first double date, I knew you weren't meant for me. You were Ryan's friend's date. But the moment you walked in, dripping wet and still smiling, I couldn't look away. I was terrible company because I was panicking about how to handle being intensely attracted to my best friend's date." Tessa laughed in surprise. "You were interested from the beginning, you barely looked at me." "Because I was trying so hard not to." Kyle's expression grew serious. "I've never believed in fate, Tessa. I built my company on strategic planning and calculated risks, but meeting you, that was pure chance, the best kind of accident. So what are you saying?" Tessa asked softly. Kyle took a deep breath. I'm saying I love you. And I'm asking if you'll consider another chance not just at dating, but at building something real together. Tessa felt warmth bloom in her chest. I love you too, and yes, I think we're worth another chance. Kyle's face lit up with relief and joy. He pulled her into an embrace, lifting her slightly off her feet in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, he kept his arms around her, as if afraid she might disappear. I should warn you, he said with mock seriousness, I'm planning to integrate myself quite thoroughly into your life. School events, Sunday morning pancakes, holiday gatherings with your parents, I want all of it. Is that so? Tessa teased, tracing a finger along his jaw. And what about your life, your fancy parties and business trips? Those are just events and obligations. You, he said, kissing her softly, are my life now, if you'll have me. 6 months later, Tessa stood in Kyle's penthouse, their penthouse now arranging student artwork in frames along the hallway. Moving in together had been Kyle's idea, but Tessa had been the one to insist her touch be evident in the previously sterile space. Now, colorful paintings hung alongside modern art pieces, and handmade pottery dotted shelves that once held only business awards. Kyle came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Perfect, he murmured against her hair. You don't think it's too much? This was your sanctuary. It's our sanctuary now, he corrected, and it finally feels like home. That evening, they hosted a dinner party for their closest friends, including Ryan and Mia, who were now engaged. As Kyle poured wine and Tessa arranged the final dish on the table, Ryan raised his glass. To the most unexpected match I've ever witnessed, he said with a grin. When I asked Kyle to join that double date, I never imagined he'd end up falling for my girlfriend's roommate. Technically, Kyle pointed out, she was supposed to be your date and Mia was mine. Mia laughed. That was the original plan, but Ryan called last minute and said he'd seen my profile and wanted to meet me instead. Tessa turned to Kyle in surprise. You never told me that part, Kyle shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eye. Some CEO secrets are worth keeping. Especially when they lead to finding the love of your life. Later, after their friends had gone and the dishes were cleaned, Kyle led Tessa to the balcony overlooking the city lights. The night air was cool and Tessa leaned into his warmth. Happy, he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Completely, she answered truthfully. Though sometimes I still can't believe how we ended up here, from that awkward double date to this. I can, Kyle said, turning her to face him. Because from the moment you challenged my assumptions about elementary art teachers, I knew you were someone special. Someone who would make me better just by being in my life. He reached into his pocket and knelt down before her. Tessa's hand flew to her mouth as he opened a small velvet box, revealing a stunning yet elegantly simple diamond ring. Tessa Harper, Kyle said, voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. You walked into that restaurant as my friend's date and walked out having claimed a piece of my heart I didn't even know was available. Every day since has been better because you're in it. Will you marry me? Tears spilled down Tessa's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she managed. Absolutely yes. Kyle slid the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a celebration, a beginning. So, Tessa said when they finally broke apart, both breathless and giddy. Does this mean I have to start introducing myself as Tessa Harper, fiancée of the CEO of Meridian Publishing? Kyle laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. How about Tessa Harper, extraordinary woman who taught a CEO how to truly live? 1 year later, they married in the botanical gardens, surrounded by family, friends, and several of Tessa's students who insisted on attending to see Miss Harper marry the bookman. The ceremony was elegant but playful, much like their relationship. During the reception, Kyle pulled Tessa onto the dance floor for their first dance, holding her close as they swayed to the music. Do you remember what you said to me that first night? He murmured in her ear. About finding joy versus finding success. Tessa nodded against his shoulder. I remember, you were right. All my life I chased success thinking it was the same as fulfillment, but this is joy. His arms tightened around her. Thank you for teaching me the difference. We taught each other, she replied, lifting her face for his kiss. And we have a lifetime of lessons ahead. As they danced, surrounded by people who loved them, Tessa couldn't help but marvel at how life could change in an instant. One reluctant double date, one unexpected connection, and everything had transformed. The CEO and the art teacher, finding in each other what they hadn't even known they were missing. In the years that followed, their story only grew richer. Kyle expanded Meridian's educational publishing division, with Tessa often consulting on new children's titles. Tessa continued teaching, using the resources of Kyle's arts initiative to bring creativity to schools throughout the city. They welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, who inherited their father's determination and their mother's artistic spirit. They faced challenges, of course. The demands of Kyle's position never fully disappeared, and Tessa occasionally still felt overwhelmed by the spotlight that came with being married to a prominent CEO. But they weathered each storm together, always returning to the foundation they'd built: honest communication, mutual respect, and the unwavering belief that what they had found together was worth protecting. On the 5th anniversary of their first date, Kyle surprised Tessa with a special edition of her favorite Brightwater children's book. Only this version told the story of a busy penguin businessman who learns the true meaning of happiness from a creative penguin teacher. The final illustration showed the penguin couple surrounded by their family beneath a starry sky that spelled out our forever story. "You're such a sentimental CEO," Tessa teased, even as she wiped away tears. "Only for you," Kyle replied, gathering her close. "Always for you." And in that moment, they were both exactly where they were meant to be in a love story neither had expected, but both had helped write, one day at a time.